I'm here interviewing my mom today. This is my mom, Larry Wilson.
Hi.
Okay, Mom, I'm going to ask you a few questions just to do an interview about your family history, the generations past, and where they came from, what made our family who we are, and kind of the race and gender um, aspects that have fit into that.
Okay.
So, where does your family call home, including us, your parents, sisters?
My whole family currently lives in Texas. Um, and the generations before my dad's side resided in Texas. My mom's side, St. Louis, and also Texas.
Um, I was going to ask the number of generations in your family who have resided in the U.S. So I guess that would go pretty far back.
It would go pretty far back. My mom's side derived from Scotland, and with the last name Cameron, and my dad's side, James, so from England.
Okay. Are there any specific traditions or religious celebrations that your family celebrates or has done?
No, other than your traditional Christian holidays over the years, Easter, Christmas. Um, those are the typical things that were celebrated. Of course, Thanksgiving.
Perfect. And to move into more of the race and gender aspect of the interview, what would you say are some of the behaviors, values, and attitudes of family members? Like, would you say everyone is pretty up to date with society in terms of acceptance, or do you think, are there any family members that stick out to you in that way?
I would say on my side of the family, my dad was an attorney, my mom a school teacher, and I'd say myself, my siblings, my parents all have, I'd say, fiscally conservative views, but progressive socially. And that I think that's been across the board for quite some time. I will say some of the older generations on Claire's dad's side, I definitely saw a difference with their mindset. Definitely more
Dated in their
dated
ways?
and setback. Definitely not politically correct.
Do you think that has something to do with their background and where they come from? Or do you think it's geographical or just rooted in
I think it's
societal
rooted.
Ways?
I'd say
Growing up ways.
Yeah, I'd say definitely where they've grown up. Grew up in Texas and small towns. I'd say too with their incredibly conservative Baptist upbringing, that definitely had some bearing on their thoughts and behaviors.
Thank you. And that kind of leads into my next question with interactions with people from diverse backgrounds. I guess with your family, no one that has that much of a diverse background other than Graham's parents, or I mean, grandparents, I guess.
Yeah, I would say no. It's all pretty homogenous. Other than socially,
Right.
Yes.
Yes, socially, of course, but the family
As far as
history.
family, no.
What would you say is people from your family, just dating back even farther generations, level of comfort or discomfort with persons of different race or ethnic backgrounds? You kind of touched on that.
Yeah, I would say I'm uncertain about my grandparents from a different generation living on a farm, some of them growing up. Although my grandfather from St. Louis definitely had more progressive views, but as far as my parents, my siblings, my nieces, my nephews, my kids, I would say there's no level of discomfort at all discussing or being around people of all different cultures, races, religions, anything like that.
And do you think that's from the way that you were raised, or do you think that's just because it's what is acceptable in society now? Or do you?
I think it's the way I was raised, and it's made it easier to
Raise us that way too.
show your feelings even growing up, and raise your children that way with open minds, progressive thinking.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, too, of conflicts within the family regarding race and ethnicity, but I wouldn't say our family has,
No.
at least not in.
I'd say, yeah, maybe Claire's
In-laws.
dad's side of the family. There have been interactions over the years that I haven't necessarily been comfortable with or approved of. And I've made that known.
What about gender roles and expectations in the family? Do you think anyone in our family has expectations for sexual identity or sexual preference?
No, not necessarily. I'd say with gender roles, for sure, as far as,
Less progressive in that way?
yes, that there was the stay-at-home mom role, there was the working dad role. But as far as, I don't know, acceptance or anything like that, I don't see that being an issue.
Okay. What about influences of other cultures on our family? Do you think there's anything from Graham's Scottish background that has influence on us at this point, or it's lost through the generations?
I think it's been lost through the generations. I think at some point when you have been in the United States for as long as it is, it really comes down to what your family values are, what your parents are teaching you. If you're a religious person, what your religion is teaching you, and those are your morals and standards and all of those. I think you kind of lose, at least in my family, that it was never, the Scottish background was never celebrated.
Mm-hmm. And what about how our race and ethnicity has affected social class? And even growing up, how do you think your social class affected the way people treated you, or based on, do you think you got to your particular social class because of your race and
Absolutely.
ethnicity?
I think it's, yes, and again, it goes back to, I had privileges that some, not financial privileges, not this, not just privileges with equality that some other races still don't have and didn't have. And yes, I would say that definitely upbringing and a little bit of privilege give you a step up.
I would agree.
Sadly.
Yes. My last question was going to be if there's any relation to major historical events to anything in our culture or background just throughout the United States, but there's nothing that...
No, I know your dad's lineage, there's Pocahontas is
Yes.
in that.
At the very beginning.
My grandfather was in the Navy, but no, I wouldn't say we were necessarily connected to anything
Major historical.
historically.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.